Talktainmentradio.com.
We give you a reason to come.
The world's greatest radio.
We give you a reason to stay.
Radio the way it should be heard.
You got the power.
The views and opinions expressed are those of the host and guests and not necessarily those of Talktainmentradio.com, 3MR Production, its ownership, management, or staff.
We've got the power.
Go ahead. Make my day.
This is the Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio. Radio the way it should be heard. And now, Mr. Neely Fuller.
If you do not understand white supremacy, which is racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Only confuse you. Only confuse you.
This is the Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I'm Brother Kahari, sitting in every week at this time. Joining me is Sister Earth Jallow, who has, of course, appeared with Mr. Fuller before in other broadcasts, and we're happy to have her here, as well as Mr. Fuller. And Mr. Fuller says something at the beginning of the show that I think is quite profound. He says, if you do not understand white supremacy, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Earth, before I give Mr. Fuller a chance to clarify that, what do you think that means?
Unless you understand the base, the root, the grass root of the problem, then everything else is not going to make any sense to you whatsoever. So you have to start with that foundation.
So, and if you don't get that foundation, then everything that you're looking at only creates chaos in your mind. You don't get it. You don't understand it. Is that what he's saying?
Absolutely.
In your opinion?
Yep. Can't face it. Can't deal with it. Don't want to accept it.
Well,
as
give me
the
an
truth.
example of it. Give me an example of how you would apply this theorem, this concept, to an actual situation.
The situation where we have an African-American president who looks like us but doesn't address our issues. And we still support and say that this is our president and we made sure that he had another 4 years. And we don't understand the fact that we're not getting anything out of this.
But you never mentioned.
No, never mentioned.
Never mentioned.
Never thought about.
In fact, when you mentioned, we run and have a beer summit.
Yeah, no, we don't get thrown a bone.
Or that person might look like my son. And you know, and that's all we get. You get symbols over substance. You never get to substance. You get a lot of symbolism. So what you're saying is you have to understand that he's not in charge. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
What does that mean when you say that?
That means he can't help you. He can't help us. He's not going to help us. So we have to understand that. And once we understand the levels of white supremacy, then we will start to understand that we must first help ourselves and stand up and have some morals and values for ourselves before we can try to, integrate.
Give me your definition of white supremacy real quick.
I can, to narrow it all down, we can look at our school systems and the lack of education that our children are getting to compete in the 21st century. In our schools, in our educational system, we are operating off of an 18th century curriculum in 21st century. This century, we are geared towards technology and information. Our students aren't getting that. They are being taught to work for someone else. Their creativity is being stifled. So that is one huge level of white supremacy. And Malcolm X said it best. We must be fools to allow our enemies to educate our children.
Jonathan Kroll said something in a book he wrote in 1991 called Savage Inequalities, in which he said that the school system in this area of the world known as the United States is more segregated in fact, he just recently said it again, more segregated in the year 2013 than it was in 1964-65. Let's bring in, of course, Mr. Neely Fuller. Mr. Fuller is author of 2 incredible works, The Word Guide and Textbook for Victims of White Supremacy. Mr. Fuller, how are you, sir?
I'm still learning.
Mr. Fuller, we look at 2013. Now we're past the inaugural. All of those symbolic and ritualistic festivities are over. Now we're getting down to the hard nuts of life day in and day out. All the holidays, holy days, as you said, are done for a while. Now everybody's settling in. But now we've got something called Black History coming up. We've got this celebration of probably, and Earth, you can get in there, Has Black History become a celebration of costumism, Afrocentricity? Does it have any meaning? Does it have any value?
How could it have meaning and have value when we're living and we look today at our society and our community and we are on the bottom? I mean, we are beneath the bottom. How can we say that we're celebrating something and half of our students don't even know who MLK was? I mean, they don't even know. So how can we say that we're living a dream? This to me is an illusion.
Let me go. Mr. Fuller, Black History Month. What does that mean to you? What does that say to you? Is that a misnomer?
Well, I'm not the originator of it, so it's been changed down through the years. Mr. Carter, Professor Carter G. Woodson.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, is supposed to have been the pioneer of it. I don't know what he would say about it, since he was the person that started it, the idea. And so I don't know what he would say about it today. But the black people today, in this area of the world, will have to interpret individually or collectively what that means, Black History Month, and not only what it means, but what it's supposed to do. What is the objective? When you establish something, anything, any type of ideology, you should have a goal. In other words, what is the goal? What are you trying to achieve? Is it celebration just for the sake of celebration? Just say that I'm here on the planet and hooray for me.
Right.
And then jump up and down in one space until you get exhausted and then fall down and go to sleep and then wake up and do the same thing again until you get to the place you can't do it anymore and then call it square. That could be one outlook on it, because that's usually when black people are called on to celebrate, that's usually what it consists of. Just find a place to jump up and down in, and so get in that place, jump up and down, turn flips, yell real loud, probably hold on to something, whatever flag somebody hands you and whatnot, and wave that, and make sure that you're heard. And then when you get exhausted, just fall down and go to sleep. And when you get up, brush yourself off and business as usual. And so I'm saying that's not a formula for solving problems. Because that's really what it comes down to. Black history or any other kind of history, the whole purpose for studying history, studying what happened yesterday, studying what happened 15 minutes ago, is to be able to solve a problem that you have now. And you can just make a list of problems and ask yourself, well, now, what I have studied, what problem is that going to position me to solve? That should be the question. What I have studied, anything that has happened in the past. So now I look around me and I say, do I have any problems? Now, how does the study of what has happened in the past help me to solve this problem that I'm looking at this morning as I get up and step out on the pavement? What problem? Name the problem and name the solution. Everything about existence on the planet is about problems and solutions.
So
people
Mr.
on the
Fuller,
planet, that's what we have found.
Mr. Fuller and Kahari, so what is it that Black History was not Black History, I'm sorry, the celebration of MLK Day, what are we supposed to get from that? After we've eaten the breakfast, after we've heard the wonderful speakers and things like that, are we supposed to go out and do something? Are there pledge cards for us to pledge our commitment to the community and the family for the year until we come back together again and see, our progress over the 12 months? What is it?
I don't know. Oh. That depends on, you have to ask the people, because that's what I would do. Mm-hmm. When someone is organizing something to celebrate something, I ask the people who are doing the organizing and the celebrate. And I say, okay, what is the purpose of your organizing, and what is the purpose of your celebrating? In order to do what? Mm-hmm. And let the persons who are doing it answer, because they would know better than anybody.
Right.
In other words, I can't speak for what somebody else is doing. That's the United Independent view of counter-racism. Whomever is doing whatever is being done, whether they're white or non-white, you just walk up to them and say, "What are you doing?" And he or she will explain it, I guess, if they choose to do so. They may not choose to do so, but they can explain it. What are you doing? And then what are you doing it for? And then last but not least, in order to achieve what?
Right.
Because you're always talking about achieving something. If you're in action, you're supposed to be trying to achieve something. What is it you're trying to achieve? And is the process that you are using achieving what you say that you're trying to achieve? Because you always look for the results.
Okay.
Where are the results?
Mr. Fuller, we're joined by a caller, and we've got Irv here, and we've got Mr. Fuller. Caller, you're on there. Do you have a question or a comment? Go ahead.
I guess it's a combination question and comment.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, this is Brother Prism.
How you doing, brother?
I'm doing fine.
Good.
And I want to give a shout out to Mr. Fuller and sister that's with you this morning.
Mm-hmm.
Good day.
I actually listened to you a few minutes ago, Brother Kahar.
Mm-hmm.
Leaving your last discussion coming into this one.
Oh, the show.
A lot of the questions that you had relative to the president and what he's able to do. Just address that, though. She's what, Earth?
Yes, Earth Jello.
I'm not telling you, Earth. I thought she did a great job of addressing that. But I was just curious when you talk about Black History Month, and I'm going to try to use some of the logic that Mr. Fuller put together in his great work.
Mm-hmm.
I would think that Black History Month today, unlike when it was established by Carter Woodson some years ago, it's a showcase today. Because
wow! Wait a minute! Now, wait a minute! Hold on, brother. You know you can't walk past words. That was a very powerful piece there. You said it's a showcase. Now you got to stop and explain to us what you mean when you say showcase.
But let's see if I can do that.
Okay, go ahead.
Using the logic of the concept that Mr. Fuller has provided us, just for racism, white supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
When Carter Woodson established Black History Week, it was to address the inadequate education and knowledge of ourselves that came through the history of our situation here in this country. As it moved forward, the racist white supremacists, under the refining technique that they use, decided these Negroes don't use it the way that they should, so let's just put it out there, because if a Black History Month exists, then we can say that racism, in fact, doesn't exist. And today, you have a lot of black folks who get together for that month, and they'll bring this speaker and that speaker, and all of them speaking about things that have nothing to do with ending the system of racism and white supremacy, but more to highlight our progress. I'm in agreement with Mr. Fuller that if the system of racism and white supremacy still exists, we can talk about progress, but negligible progress means nothing. And if we haven't really impacted this system the way that we should by this time, then our work is still there to be done. It hasn't been completed yet. So the constant reverberations of we've done this, we've progressed here, we progressed there. The racist white supremacists sit up on the mountaintop saying these Negroes think they've done something, but we still control everything in all 9 areas of people activity. And as long as they think that they're in control, that they've done something, we don't have to do anything. We can just
so let me be clear. Let me be clear. Are you saying you don't believe there has been any progress? We just did a piece on Reconstruction. You don't believe there's been any progress whatsoever since 1865, for example, 1866. You're saying that we're in basically the same spot?
Well, I would say, Brother Kahari, that I'm going to look at the unemployment rate that exists in the black collective.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to look at the life expectancy of those of us who are male in the black collective. I'm going to look at the level of single-parent families in the black collective. I'm going to look at the level of incarceration and then formerly incarcerated people in the black collective. And I would suggest to you that as much as it sounds like it's changed, a lot of it is very, very much the same. We're just caught up on what it appears to be. And, for instance, I'll give you another for instance. I'm a firm believer that we should be talking about the people that were part of this movement towards our, I don't want to call it freedom, but, well, we'll have to figure out what it is. Denmark, VC, Gabriel Prosser, David Walker, Frederick Douglass, W.E.B. Du Bois. You know, you name them all through history.
Henry Highland Garnett, Harriet Tubman, Sojourner, all of them.
Right. Absolutely. And one of my favorites of all time, Fannie Lou Hamer. I'm sure Mr. Fuller was familiar with.
Right.
Now, the reason that these people have existed through time and exist into this day is because there's a struggle that's going on. There's something that they see and that they put themselves in position to fight against that we sometimes lose sight of. So I'm always taking a look at who that person is, and Mr. Fuller is one of them today. Mr. Fuller is consistently saying, I'm still learning, I'm still working on this, I'm still trying to understand. I have the greatest respect for Mr. Fuller because he has done a wonderful, wonderful job of taking a foolish guy like me and making me take a step back, look at where we are. And so if you ask me, have we gone, have we changed as much as, have we changed? Yes. Have we changed as much as we should, or as much as possible, as much as we can to benefit the children that are coming along? No. We are passing on to them the same problems that we've had to contend with. And I'm in my 50s, Brother Kahari.
The same system of behavior we're passing along, which gives us the same results, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Earth Jallow, go ahead.
I just wanted to jump in because, I have three very intelligent black men on the line here. And I want to know from you all, from the black man's perspective, are we doomed? Because, I look at this and I look at our children and, some of us are okay. Don't get me wrong. Some of the children are doing phenomenal things. Some of the adults are doing phenomenal things. But it's not enough of us to really make that serious impact to stand up and have the world to notice. So I'm asking, are we doomed, you all?
Mr. Fuller, let me get your thoughts on this.
Yes, the question is,
are we doomed? Are we doomed as a group of people?
No, not until we stop. We're doomed when we stop trying. As long as we're trying, we're not doomed. That's what we're put here for. Obviously, if we use logic, it comes down to what are we doing in the universe, period. Why do we exist? And why do we exist in the conditions that we've been given? Well, apparently, whatever created the universe put us in this condition. We have to go back to that. It's the only thing that is logical. And put us in this condition for what? For what reason, I don't know, but we are in that condition. And the first thing we can ascertain is, okay, since we're here, something put us here, or somebody put us here, in the condition that we're in. And what is that condition? The condition is we're surrounded by problems. Problems, what do you do with problems? You solve problems after you stop and think about it for a little while. Well, what problems do you solve? The one that is right in front of you. Otherwise, the problem wouldn't be there. Since we didn't make ourselves. See, we always start with the genesis of we are here. I did not make myself. I did not make my fingernails. I did not make my brain. I did not make any of that. I had nothing to do with that. I don't know where all of this is put together, but it's a pretty excellent package, I would say. When you look at a person, any person, you're looking at something that's quite phenomenal. Fingers, toes, a brain, something that breathes in and out, breathes air with lungs. I didn't do any of that. And no one who's walking the face of the planet can claim that they did.
Well, Mr. Fuller, let me get a point of clarification from Earth. Earth, what do you mean by doomed? Maybe I should have asked that from the beginning. That's kind of a tricky point. Well, what do you mean by doomed?
Like, are we gonna be able in 20, 30 years be able to have young people who will not be in this same condition? I've watched it from as young as I can remember from my great grandmother, my grandmother, I'm sorry, and watching her struggle and the things that, my family went through when I was young, and then, trying not to repeat those same behaviors. And as I graduated high school, I see how we were together, and we kicked it, and we got together, we raised money, and now I see that they shoot each other for recreation. So I'm wondering, in 20 or 30 years, are we still going to be here?
That's a very good definition of what you mean by doom. Prism, stay right there. Mr. Fuller, stay right there. Earth, stay right there. We're going to get even deeper into this. More to come on the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller. Stay right there.
The hardest thing to do at times is to make changes in your routine. Don't let that hold you back.
Oh, wait a minute. They told us we had an oil shortage. Well, yeah, I guess in a way we are running out of oil.
Your opportunity is now to get up-to-the-minute information, great entertainment, and stimulating talk programs on your computer.
We are three voices.
Just log on to TalkTainmentRadio.com, click Listen Live to hear a program. TalkTainmentRadio.com can also be heard on your cell phone. Talktainment Radio. We go where you go. Look out, automobiles. Here we come. Now that's radio. The world's greatest radio. Radio, the way it should be heard.
The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept by Neely Fuller is considered as one of the substantial and basic books for understanding and effectively countering racism. Neely Fuller will turn upside down everything you've heard and everything you think you know about racism and how it works. Call area code 202-484-5461. 202-484-5461.
Delightful Cakes isn't just cakes for birthdays or anniversaries. Delightful Cakes is also cookies and cupcakes, pies, fresh coffee, and of course, breads. Designed and made to your order by Sandy & Company with fresh bite-sized samples always available. Mention Talktainment Radio for 10% off your total purchase. Ask for details. Delightful Cakes Bakery. Cakes for every occasion. 2171 West Dublin Granville Road, just off 315, 614-209-2471, or sweet wishes at delightfulcakesbakery.com.
Columbus, come back home to Long Street. Stop in at 17th and Long and visit Gene Walker's Cafe on Long for the best homemade soups and desserts. Then come next door to celebrate our 4th anniversary of the Book Suite, your neighborhood bookstore, and discover all our new local authors. This is James Mason. Come out and show your support for small businesses. Call us at 252-4552. The Book Suite. Come get involved on Long Street.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
I'm Tammy Rager, host of The Now Age and numerologist to the stars. I've got your lucky numbers on Conversate the AM on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 9:11 a.m. Make sure you tune in for your lucky number. Punch in TalkTainmentRadio.com and click on Listen Live and listen for your lucky number.
We've got the power.
Justice is better than racism.
This is the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com. Radio, the way it should be heard. I'm Brother Kahari, sitting in every week with Mr. Neely Fuller as we break down a number of issues related to race, racism, white supremacy, etc., all the things that come with that. Mr. Fuller, as you know, has written what we consider here at TalkTainmentRadio.com and, of course, by many across the world as the definitive works on racism. Irv Jallow is joining me. Brother Prism is here, and, of course, Mr. Fuller is here. I wanted to hit Irv back up one more time. Irv, I needed a clear, you were defining this notion of doom. Can you give us both, all three of us, a quick, very quick example, because I want to get Mr. Fuller and Prism's response to it, but I want to give me a quick example of what you mean by doomed from one generation to the next.
But what I mean by doomed is, are we doomed to continue to repeat these same mistakes and same issues that we have been dealing with as adults? Will our children in 20 to 30 years be sitting on radios and writing books, dealing with the very same issues that we've been talking about? So are we doomed to continue to go through history and eras like this and not climb out of this deep crater?
And every go round, our conditions get worse and worse.
Absolutely.
All right, Mr. Fuller?
Yes. If we don't understand the problem we're supposed to be working on. That's what I was talking about just a few minutes ago. What is our assignment? Our assignment, apparently, is to replace the system of white supremacy with the system of justice. And then, logically speaking, what would justice be? Well, since it's never been produced by anybody, we'd have to produce it. And so you have to have a definition for it so you'll know what you're producing. So I came up with a compensatory definition for it, since there is no legal definition for the word justice, and that is guaranteeing that no person is mistreated in any area of activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. And, number two, guaranteeing that every person who needs constructive help gets that constructive help. And that would be, as a concept, the practice of justice. But you can't have justice and racism on the same planet at the same time. That's totally impossible. It's going to be one or the other.
So the way to counter the doom that Earth is talking about is that we must move to dismantle white supremacy. Is that what you're saying?
You have to actually eliminate the system of white supremacy, which just means mistreating people based on color. And in this particular case, white people who have chosen to be white supremacists. That's not all white people.
That's right.
But the white people who have chosen to be white supremacists have turned out to be the smartest and most powerful people that the planet has ever seen. So, but these people are dedicated to mistreatment, because racism is about mistreatment of people, dominating and mistreating people based on color. That system has to be understood and then dismantled, disappeared, taken apart, and replaced with a better system. And that better system, from a concept, would be the system of justice, guaranteeing that no one is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. And you can start out doing that just by doing it every day. Just say, who needs the most constructive help? And then ask the question. Now, in the process of getting constructive help to the people who need it most, is anybody being mistreated? Because you have to eliminate the mistreatment too. Now, that is a real tightrope to walk, but that's where we should be going. See, we've been talking for 40 or 50 years since the so-called civil rights era about making quote-unquote progress. But you have to have specifics in making progress. You just don't make progress going in any direction for any old reason. Just anybody starts handing out anything to you and say, hey, this is a part of the progress. Well, why is it progress? Because it's different. Well, everything different is not progress. So you have to examine everything that is handed to you.
Say that again, Mr. Fuller. Say that again. That's very quotable.
Everything that is different is not necessarily progress.
Very
it has to be what? Well, what would be progress? Constructive. Everything in the universe, every move that a person makes, like just right what I'm doing this minute, talking, I'm discussing something. Now, it's going to fall in one of two categories. There's not a lot of categories you have to study. It's just one of two, because it's not but two. Constructive, non-constructive. Every time you open your mouth and get ready to say something, you are going to say something that's going to have a constructive effect or a non-constructive effect. There's no in-between. It's real simple. The formulas of the universe are basically simple. The white supremacists take simple things and make them complicated. So one of the jobs that we have, the victims of racism, to make one of the major jobs, I would say the most important job, is to clarify and focus what you're supposed to be doing and why you're supposed to be doing it. That's got to be clear each and every day when you get up. When you get ready to make a move, you're going in a direction. Where am I going and what for? And is it going to have a constructive effect or a non-constructive effect? Because the white supremacists want their victims to always be engaged in something that is non-constructive. And boy, have we been in the non-constructive mode.
Irv, as you and Prism look around and you see that we have an African American or a black person that was just sworn in 2 days ago as president, the notion of white supremacy, when we hear white supremacy this, white supremacy that, a lot of people just don't believe it. They don't buy it. They don't think it exists. How would you go about, Irv, if somebody asked you if it exists in prison? I'm going to ask you the same question. How would you go about proving, if you want to use the word proving, or showing or documenting to them how it exists? Irv, and then I go to prison.
I would do what Mr. Fuller has taught me to do, and that is to ask questions. Make them think. And before you know it, they will tell you about white supremacy. So if they didn't believe it before, if you ask the right questions, they will eventually have to tell not only themselves, but you as well.
But they'll say the Ku Klux Klan. They'll say Bull Connor. They'll say the skinheads. They'll say the Nazi Party. And all of that has no power. That's what they'll tell you.
It really depends on what questions you ask. Now, if you want to get down and ask some questions like, tell me about your community and how many young folks you lose by gun violence in your community. If I ask them about their children's education and if their children are getting the top-notch education compared to other surrounding areas in their educational system, then they will have to eventually start to tell the truth.
Brother Prism, let me get your take.
Actually, I believe I agree with what Mr. Earth has said, but I would, and just being able to listen to Mr. Fuller really give some detail helps a little bit because I've read his work a number of times. United Independent Compensatory Code System concept deals with a micro and a macro level. So when I think of are we doomed, well, Mr. Fuller's work has and will be, as we move forward, one of the most important concepts that we as a collective are going to have to work with. Before I read Mr. Fuller's work, I'd already done research with Chancellor Williams and E. Franklin Frazier, and you name them, any brother who's written anything, even Cecil Brown going back to the 1960s. I'd read a lot of that stuff. I didn't put it together. I didn't understand it, and I didn't understand how the system worked. Mr. Fuller told me it was a system, and then I began to look at it different. So now, are we doomed? Well, as more and more people become aware that we're dealing with a system, and not individual groups that they put up and tell us are racist white supremacists, but a system, then we begin to get more clear about what it is we need to do. Because we don't have the firepower to beat this system down. We're not going to do it that way. You beat them with knowledge. You beat racism by using counter-racism. And you develop counter-racism by looking at the situation as it is. The evidence is already available for us to see in 9 areas of people activity. Mm-hmm. Where we fall short, where we've been constrained, where we've been regimented, it's all there. So what I do, and I talk to young groups regularly.
Let me ask you this, Brother Prism. Are you saying that counter-racism should become a system itself?
Absolutely. That's the only way you're going to beat a system that's regimented like racism. But people have to understand the nature of racism before they can counter it. That's what Mr. Fuller does all the time.
Okay, now, if you set up a counter-racist system, give me an example, if you can, of where a counter-racist system would actually play itself out on the ground. I'm asking Mr. Fuller that same question at Earth. How does it play itself out in day-to-day existence? Give me, create a case study or a situation of where counter-racism would work.
Well,
I'm sorry.
Well, it doesn't matter. Mr. Fuller, you can go ahead and respond. Mr. Fuller?
Yes.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Well, first of all, you say, first of all, is a system of racism in place? Is that the dominant system? Just like the lady said. People will say, hey, I don't know what you're talking about. You say, okay, you get up every day and you look around, you walk around in the world. Do you ever ask yourself, who is causing everything to happen around you that's happening? How does all these things come together? I mean, who's doing what? Look at all the people. Look at all of their movements. Everybody that you can encounter. Drive up and down the highways and just look from each side of the highway. Who's running things? I mean, things are things just running on their own, or the ants running things, or the bears running things, or the birds running things? Who is in charge? I mean, somebody's in charge of something. Okay? So you look around and you say, now, it looks like people have a lot to do with what is happening. Everything that I see going on around me, all the strange things that I see going on around me. Then I ask, what people seem to be doing most to make decisions about what happens. So you just look at that. See, all you have to do, as Confucius said, is just look and see what you're looking at. That's one of the main things. Sometimes we look at a lot of things. We look at thousands of things all day long, but we don't see what we're looking at. But when you pay attention to details, you begin to say, oh, well, it seems like it's just some people who are making the major decisions. Now, let me study these some people. And so you look at them and you might find out, well, now, some people seem to be doing more than others when it comes to making decisions about things. Now, what do these people look like? So you pay attention to that. In other words, everything is about logic and paying attention. Paying attention to details, not just whizzing by everything. Because victims of racism seem to just like to move fast. We talk fast, we move fast, and we don't recognize anything.
That's right.
And so we need to just slow down. Sometimes the person that just sits by the side of the road and just watches things, not zoom by, but watches everything in slow motion. And then you begin to see things you didn't see before. You're looking right at it all the time.
Yeah, I mean, that's like driving through a neighborhood versus walking through a neighborhood.
Yes, and you begin to notice things. That's why a long time ago they said, well, hey, we'll put law enforcement people in comfortable cars, and that way they won't notice anything. They're too busy looking at whatever, writing reports or eating a sandwich or whatever, and passing right by everything that they're supposed to be checking out. Because when they were walking, they paid attention to things.
Mm-hmm.
All right? They could see things, and they'd walk in and they'd say, hi, Ralph. How did they know that the fellow's name was Ralph? Because they see Ralph all the time. And Ralph introduced himself in front of the pool hall one day last summer. So when they see Ralph, they know that's Ralph. They even know the sound of Ralph's voice. So when they hear Ralph, they hear a scream come from the alley. They say, that sounds like Ralph. Why? That officer knows Ralph's voice. He's been seeing Ralph around there for the last 5 years as he walked this beat. So he runs down the alley, and sure enough, Ralph is being beaten by 2 robbers. And the fellow recognizes, hey, they're beating Ralph. I know something about Ralph. He hangs around here, but he doesn't bother anybody. Those guys are robbing him. So now what has happened? That officer has increased his knowledge, or her knowledge, by being what? Familiar with things, paying attention to things, being in position where they can see things up close and personal. This is one reason why the white supremacists, when they get ready to really get serious and have a conference about something that's really important, they don't want any black people around. But anything that's foolish, anything that's stupid, any kind of parade they're going to have that's going to lead nowhere except to something non-constructive, they come and gather up the black people and they're all out there in the street doing our thing. They'll embrace us when it comes to anything that's leading nowhere. But when it comes to real serious business, when they really want to sit around and be the dons of the world, they don't want black people anywhere around.
That explains that explains what I was saying earlier. Politicians, when they want to throw a party, then they come to black folks. But when serious issues need to be discussed or need to be dealt with, we are nowhere in sight. This is what's been going on for quite a while. We got another caller that's joined us. Everybody stay right there. We've got more. We got a lot more to get into with Mr. Neely Fuller. And this is the compensatory concept heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com. Don't go nowhere.
The United Independent Compensatory Code System concept by Neely Fuller is considered as one of the substantial and basic books for understanding and effectively countering racism. Neely Fuller will turn upside down everything you've heard and everything you think you know about racism and how it works. Call area code 202-484-5461. 202-484-5461.
At highway speeds, the average text takes your eyes off the road for about 5 seconds. That's enough time to travel the length of a football field. Stop texts, stopwrecks.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Our lives are affected every day by innovations from the minds of African Americans. Support the United Negro College Fund because a mind is a terrible thing to waste. Visit uncf.org or call 1-800-332-UNCF. Brought to you by UNCF and the Ad Council.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
We've got the power.
Justice is better than racism.
This is the Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com, radio the way it should be heard, alongside Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., who is the author of 2 incredible and definitive works. Mr. Fuller, quickly tell us where we can get your work, and then I've got another caller who wants to weigh in, along with Earth Jallow and Brother Prism, who are here. Mr. Fuller, how can we get your works?
You get it by punching up on the computer the word tiny, TINY, .cc/forward, and the word Fuller in capital letters. Repeat, that's the word tiny, TINY, .cc, then a /, and then the word Fuller in capital letters. What should come up on your screen is a brief description of the basic textbook workbook for thought, speech, and/or action for victims of racism, and the word guide if you want that as an addition.
Okay. Second caller who just joined us, you have a question or a comment or a thought for Mr. Fuller. Go ahead.
A thought. I like the idea that we're looking to find out what solutions are to these issues and how we can, recognize true it is that there's very few a group of people who are making these decisions for the group as a whole. But on the flip side of that, there's very few still willing to take a stand and claim this is wrong. Recently watching the Freedom Riders and that whole documentary on WOSU and realizing back in 1961 there was 183,691,481 people. And only a little over 400 people over the course of that year is what made the difference to make travel interstate where black and white could ride together. So that's only a 0.025% of U.S. citizens who participated in the Freedom Ride. So still today, we have so few people willing to take a stand and say, hey, this is wrong. We got to do something about this.
That's an interesting point. Mr. Fuller, did you have a question related to that? That was a statement. Give me a question that you want Mr. Fuller to respond to off of that.
Does he believe that there's any today difference of mindset and cowtown mentality that puts us different from 1961?
That's interesting. Mr. Fuller, go ahead. That's a very interesting question.
If I understand the question, the tactics that were used then were effective. And the white supremacists knew that they would be effective because they were willing to concede certain things, like taking the signs down and saying that black people can sit anywhere on the buses and go to the restaurants and the theaters and all like that. So a lot of that was about that. But the white supremacists, just like any organized criminal operation, or like the character in the movie Gandhi said, we have to measure how much we will allow Mr. Gandhi to have, and we have to measure how much we will not allow him to have. So the white supremacists already made their decisions in the 1960s that when it comes to the armed services, when it comes to restaurants, when it comes to cafes, when it comes to public transportation, eventually we'll have to let these black people sit on the front of the bus. Eventually we'll have to let them go into the drugstore and sit at the counter and get a malted milk. Eventually we'll have to let them go to any of the theaters and whatnot. We can't keep that going on. And eventually we cannot allow them to have a separate army or a separate aircraft carrier that's all black floating around on the seas with nuclear weapons. So we're going to have to let them intersperse themselves all over the armies. And so these decisions were made in front anyway. Said we will do it grudgingly, but eventually we'll have to have that happen. But what we won't do is dismantle the entire system of white supremacy worldwide. We're not going to do that. We're going to make it more sophisticated. We're going to give a lot of black people up front showcase positions so that anywhere you go, you'll see plenty of black faces up front. Used to be black faces in the back. We're going to have black faces up front. So the question was, what do you do about it now? Do you have, try to cultivate some leaders like in the old days and teach them methodically how to lead demonstrations and all like that? No, the white supremacists know that will not be effective now with the frame of references that they have now. So what do? You make every person who is a victim of racism a leader, and that person leads him or herself. Now, that person, like myself, who am I going to lead other than myself? Lead where? It comes down to what I do every day. Thought, speech, and action. When every person is leading him or herself, every victim of racism, every prisoner of war, worldwide, is following what? See, because when you're talking about leadership, you're talking about followership. You no longer follow people. That's the key. You follow what? But you got to be following something. You follow a code. What kind of code? A code that's designed to dismantle the system of racism. And you do this by what you say and what you do and the way that you think, your entire behavior, and you do it each and every day because the white supremacists have a code. This is why there's no such thing as the leader of white supremacy, the system of white supremacy, because every person who participates is a leader. He's leading him or herself, and it's been that way since the beginning of white supremacy. That's why it's been so long-lasting. And so the victims of racism have been led to not understand that because we have a herd mentality. We always think that we always think that we can't breathe when we get up in the morning unless we have some leader 2,000 miles away that appears in person and says, "Okay, it's breathing time now. You all can now breathe in unison." And so the black people stand there and say, "Okay, breathing time." So we start breathing. Say, "All right, now everybody take one step forward." So
it's sort of like a scene out of The Wiz when they went around that circle.
Yes. Now, the white supremacists understand that formula, so they like it. They like it like that. Why? Because when you appoint a leader, say, "This is our leader. Finally, our Messiah has come. This is the black person that's going to really take us out of the woods," and whatnot. So the white supremacist says, "Well, now, hey, is that all you got? Because I can always deal with that one person that you just appointed to be your leader. Because I can always kill him. And then you'll spend the next 50 years mourning his death." All right? And in the meantime, I'm moving on with my next program. Huh?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. You had another question. Go ahead.
My question is, we've got some states that are more like our problem children than others when it comes to these issues. And I remember that it wasn't too long ago, and when I say not too long ago, I would say, in the last decade, Alabama has always been an issue, even though it's highly populated with blacks. There was a high school there that could not segregate. They were still forced to segregate their prom. And this happened within the last 7 to 10 years.
Yeah.
So how does stuff like that still happen under our current government that they don't get more than a smack on the hand like the governor did, who was on this same documentary that I watched for the Freedom Riders? How do they get away with that on a state rule that's got federal money?
You're talking about in the year 2013?
Yeah.
Mr. Fuller.
The segregated prom in Alabama was in the last, I would say, 7 to 10 years.
Well, caller, I'm sure if you've read Jonathan Cole's books, savage. It'll come to me. Yeah, savage inequalities. He talks about even. I just saw him just recently on a show just in 2013 saying, "Hey, we're more segregated now in the so-called school system than we were in 1965, and more unequal in terms of black and white than we were in 1965." So I'm gonna give Mr. Fuller a chance to respond. Go ahead, Mr. Fuller.
Well, what the white supremacists do is play magic tricks. Now you see it, now you don't. They'll say, okay, we will give you this, that, and the other in the field of education. So black people will run to the field of education. But meanwhile, they will be dismantling something else, like your job situation or your housing situation. And so we have to watch every piece of the checkerboard, you might say, and do it simultaneously. Because they say if black people can only think of one thing at a time, their minds are not made any other way, because we have geared their minds that way. So if we tell them, oh, the focus is on the schools, so black people will focus on the schools. But meanwhile, the job situation is completely deteriorated because they are making it deteriorated. So that will deteriorate the child going to school. The child is dropping out of school looking for a job, all right? And then the legal system. In other words, you got 9 areas of activity, 9 moves on that checkerboard, and you have to watch every move under a microscope each and every day, each and every minute, all the time. It's just, that's what the job calls for. Why? Because the white supremacists have the setup like that.
Let me
what
ask.
Are these 9 areas? Economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Now, they'll be glorifying black people in the area of politics and completely sending them into mass confusion in religion or in sex. Hey, just keep them confused, because when you got people confused in any area of activity, it's going to poison every other area.
Say that again, Mr. Fuller.
When you have people confused in one area of activity, you will have them completely confused and completely non-constructive in all the other areas of activity, because confusion is the mother of destruction. Every time you have people who are confused about anything, those people are going to be destroyed.
Confusion is the mother of destruction. Let me ask, Brother Prism, in your opinion, people who want to counter racism effectively, do they have the discipline that Mr. Fuller is talking about? He's saying that everyone becomes a self-sustaining unit that counters this day in and day out. Do you believe that the discipline is there to make that happen, Brother Prism?
Well, actually, I don't believe that we have the discipline. I don't believe that most people have the discipline to read Mr. Fuller's book the way that it should be read and to apply it the way that it should be applied. But whether the discipline is there or not really is not an issue, because the suffering is going to be there. And when you're tired of the suffering, you're going to begin looking for solutions to that suffering. And therein lies the opportunity for you to develop greater understanding. And hopefully that greater understanding will lead us to the place we need to be to counter this. So I don't think there's any panacea out there. I agree with Mr. Fuller that confusion is the enemy of clarity. And clarity is definitely necessary if we're going to make any real changes. But it's not something that's going to happen overnight. My understanding of Mr. Fuller's work didn't come in the first few weeks or the months that I read it. Mm-hmm. It took a lot of listening and a lot of, even with you, Brother Kahari, I haven't spoken with you for a couple of years now, but I've been paying attention to Mr. Fuller's work for a very, very long time, and I think I've got an understanding of it. So, no, I don't think there's any clear panacea. I do believe, though, because I can look at it right here in my neck of the woods. There was a time a few years ago when I sit in a meeting and we talk about community. People are now a little hesitant to talk about community unless we're talking about a community of sufferers. We talk about leaders, and people are a little more careful about using the term leader, because if it's a person designated by a white person as a leader, then what does that mean for those of us who are suffering from racism and white supremacy? You can't look at it that way. So gradually, in my neck of the woods, people are coming together and getting a greater understanding.
So the concepts are changing, is what you're saying. People are picking up on this, in a small way.
And Brother Kahari, I would think that Mr. Fuller, he is not. His voice is heard universally, but he is probably not aware of the impact that he has. But I think that when he hears someone like me calling in and hearing you and others, he's saying, well, gee, my work has done something. It's actually impacted some people, and it absolutely has. We use that work. I've actually given away 3 or 4 of the books. We use that work to develop the understanding that we have. So I think that the work that you've been doing and Mr. Fuller's involvement is monumental in helping us get further along this path. I would love to say that in my lifetime we'll deal with this. I don't think we will, but I think that in my lifetime we'll get a cadre of people who are thinking about counter-racism in ways that individually they can affect it, in ways that as a group they can affect it.
Well, you make that's a very good point. And I want to ask Mr. Fuller this, and I know he's probably addressed this many times, but I want him to address it one more time. Mr. Fuller, in our lifetime, in the next 20 to 25 years, can we get this done?
Oh, sure. We can get it done, I'd say, by tomorrow morning. All we have to do is just understand that we're in a system of racism, and we're supposed to be replacing it with a system of justice. That is supposed to be our focus. We use the word focus, Focus. Focus. That's our reason for being. Like a person in the Marines say, hey, your focus is that rifle. Your focus is taking that hill. That's your reason for being. That's the reason you were born, to go up there and take that hill today. Once black people say, oh, what is my reason for being? Your reason for being is to solve problems, and the problem you've been assigned to solve is the one that's giving you a fit, and that's the problem of racism. Real simple. 1, 2. You're born, and you're born to end racism and replace it with justice, because everything seems to point for that. If you ever notice, black people are at their best when they're dealing or trying to deal, even in an angry way or in a sort of a slipshod way, with the problems of racism, when they're trying to figure out what to do and what not to do. That's when our minds work best. Once we get away from that, if you notice, we don't even know what to do about anything. And we do stupid stuff full time. But the minute we get on anything that's racial, we begin to make the most sense. That's why most of the people that we talk about, most of the black people who have made the most sense, Nelson Mandela, Frederick Douglass, Booker T. Washington, Malcolm X, whomever you name, Fannie Lou Hamer, is always someone who was addressing a race issue. Mary McLeod
Bethune.
Yes. Bethune. Yes, right. On the standing on the Capitol steps and whatnot, addressing racism. These are the people that stand out. Why? They're on their assignment. That's why. People that are not on their assignment are not going to stand out.
Wow.
It's heavy. That is tremendously heavy.
People who are not on their assignment will not stand out. I'm Facebooking that, Mr. Fuller.
You're saying that's a Mr. Fuller, we got about less than a minute. Are you saying that's a universal assignment?
That's a universal assignment. Any little black girl in Central Africa right now who begins to say, I'm in a system of racism. Somebody told me that. I learned that at that little school up there when I was barefooted and whatnot. Somebody came from somewhere and said something about racism. And so I'm going to do something about it, starting right here in my little village. I'm going to start talking about it and whatnot. Now, she will suddenly, or at some time, 20 years later, her picture will be in a paper in London. Why? She's on her assignment.
All right. Mr. Fuller, thank you so much. Callers, thank you so much. Thank everybody so much. I really appreciate all of you being here. You've been listening to The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com. Thanks for listening to The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio.
The most important question in all racial matters is why. One should always ask it.
Radio, the way it should be heard.
You got the power. Radio, the way it should be heard.